Okay, so I've already been over how to apply your design onto the fabric. My preferred method being the tracing and tacking method. So I'm doing this little daffodil for us today, and I'm using the green translucent thread, and I've already drawn the design on with my Micron Sakura pen. So I'm going to move that out of the way. This is the green translucent that I'm using here. Now, I've actually tied that on, so the needle that I'm using is the one that I always use for couching, which is an embroidery needle. I've actually done a knot here so that it's one single strand on there. So the reason why I've done this is because when I'm tacking, I always prefer to use one strand. I don't like to use two, but usually for the translucent thread, I will always use it double, and I'll go over that in a short while as to how I do that. Okay, so I am just now going to start doing the tacking. So I'm just going to take the needle there and I'm going to poke it up through the tracing. Just got to find the right spot, and we're just going to do a nice little running stitch all along these lines. I've actually pinned this on. You can just about see the pin here. I've pinned it up at the top as well, and that just holds the tracing paper in place. So let me just pull that out now, and hopefully it won't pop out, because the knot will always be a little bit smaller. So I'm going to do these quite large stitches, and they never need to be really, really small unless you're going round a corner. So they can be quite large. It's just depicting the edges of our design here. You see that I'm leaving a good gap between as well. So that means that when you've taken off the tacking, then you can actually just tickle the back of the fabric, and that takes any of the looser threads through to the front. So you'll notice here that I've actually done 1, 2, 3 stitches, and then what I'm going to do is I'm just then going to pull that thread like that. And then that way it doesn't take you anywhere near as long to actually tack the whole design onto the fabric. Now you will notice that I'm going to do some slightly smaller stitches on the flower head. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to do one little stitch out the side there, and I'm going to do one little stitch at the top. So you can see there I've done one little stitch here and I've done one little stitch just there, and that then just lets me see where my flowers need to be, where my petals of my flower needs to be. So I'm just going to put some little stitches in, just like that, and I'm just putting 2 in for each petal. Now you will also notice that I did a tiny little stitch here, and I've done some rather long stitches here. So if you're on the straight, you can do much longer stitches, and if you're doing curves, then shorter stitches are much better. Okay, so we'll just do a few more stitches just around our flower head here, and then we can take our tracing off the fabric. So we're nearly there, and then we can take our tracing off our fabric. Okay, so one more little stitch, because for this one you've actually got a little stitch up to the end of the petal, so there's no real need for you to actually put a stitch there as well. So that's our stitching on. Now I'm just going to do another little stitch here like that, which will then secure that thread in place. Okay, I'm going to take the needles off like that. Okay, and I'm going to get a reasonably big needle like this one. This is the one that I actually use for the passing thread normally. Okay, I'm going to take this needle, and again, like we did the last time, I'm just going to run my needle along the stitches, and what that does is it actually allows you to then take the tracing paper off in one piece. Now you'll notice with the heart was a very simple design, so therefore it's much easier when you've got a simple design to take the tracing paper off. However, when you've got a more complex design, this one's still quite simple, but it's more complex. Obviously, it's got a lot more lines on it than the heart had on it. Then it's harder to actually take it off in one piece. But you'll see with this particular method, which I developed many years ago, and there's lots of people that are now using this method as well, it will just come off in one piece, and then you'll see that your design is almost complete. It doesn't always come off that well. It generally does most of the time that I do it, but some of my ladies struggle a little bit sometimes. So you'll see there, you've got a little bit of a loop there and a little bit of a loop there. Now, if you give it a little bit of a tickle like that, just on the back of your fabric, can you see how those little loops have now disappeared? Now, here you can see these are your lines for this particular leaf. These are your lines for this leaf. And then we've got each one of the side and top, side and top, side and top of our petals. Okay, so that's where we're going to start on our leaf.